Could I ask members and everybody else to come to their seats, please? Thank you. I'd like to get going. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. First of all, a welcome to all members. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you to officers, and thank you to any members of the public that are populating the public gallery. Great to see you. Thank you for coming today. We have two items this morning, but before we get to those, I just need to remind you about microphone protocol and how to use a system that is shortly going to be replaced. But I'm going to do my statutory duty and read out the etiquette and usage guidance. May I remind all attendees to use the microphones when speaking. Please remember to turn on the microphone when speaking, ensuring that you speak into the microphone itself or in the direction of the microphone. Once you have finished speaking, please turn it off. Correct usage of the system will allow for an enjoyable sound experience for all. And if you haven't managed to absorb that, even though you've heard it many, many times, I'm told there is a laminated copy of the detailed instructions on each row, should you need it. So that's that one out of the way. First of all, can we go to declarations of interest? Are there any declarations of interest? No. No, thank you. And could we then move to confirmation of minutes? This is for the meeting on the 31st of July, 2024. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Yep, okay, thank you. And any information regarding substitute members? I think we have one or two, don't we?
Thank you, Chair. We've actually got a full house, no substitute members.
Oh, no substitute members, okay, thank you. That's great. So the protocol is, because we've got members of the public in the public gallery, I'll just briefly go through the protocol of how we deal with particular applications. On this occasion, there are no speakers. So when we move to Rob Buffin, who's the officer who will present this application, he will go through his presentation. On completion of that, we will then break to the members for questions and then any resulting debate. So it's fairly straightforward. So I'm going to move now to Rob and ask him to introduce item 1, which is regarding Wheaton Barracks and the installation of a solar array, or as we usually call it, a solar farm. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So the application site is as red edged on the right hand image. It forms part of Wheaton Barracks. It's located within the exercise area of Wheaton Barracks. You can see by the aerial image, Wheaton Barracks is positioned to the north of Wheaton Village. The exercise area is set to the south of a private access road, which serves for the barracks. It also serves for a group of farm and businesses that operate within that farm holding. And we have the main built area of Wheaton Barracks positioned to the north. The site itself is allocated as a large developed site in the countryside as per our local plan. Just a bit of detail about the site itself. So that's the red edge, obviously, that you can see on that drawing is the red edge of the application site. The aerial image is embedded below, so we can see from that there's no buildings on the site. It's predominantly hard surface. The hard surface that you can see centrally, they're the remainder of buildings that were formerly occupied on the site. There are landscaped edges to the southern and western boundaries, which we can see by that we've got trees and sporadic hedgerow forms. Surrounding character, it's a rural location, it's relatively flat, predominantly agricultural fields. We've got a building group to the southeast over here, there's one to the northwest over here. We've also got an existing solar farm development to the west. That yellow line that you can see there is a public right of way. And there's also a rail corridor that runs there. That is a raised rail corridor. It's probably about 2 meters higher than the land levels immediately to the east or to the west. Just for a bit of detail, the building group to the southeast, we can see here, we've got the application site edged red. This building group is converted farm buildings, I believe. There's a car sales business in there, and we've got a couple of stables dotted around. Importantly, we've got a group of houses here. So those aspects of those houses, that's front facing to the north, overlooking the exercise area of the barracks. And as you can see, there is some intervisibility between those houses and the red edge, but largely these houses are screened by those existing agricultural and business units. Building group to the northwest, couldn't squeeze the application site and the building group into one, so the aerial image embedded to the right, that just shows the relationship of that building group to the red edge. We've got probably 400 meter separation distance. There's a mix of 2-story dwellings, so the dwellings are positioned in this location. So we have a rear facing aspect to the south, and there's some residential properties here. These are again former agricultural buildings which have been converted to business units, and then obviously we've got a much larger scale agricultural building to the south. Development proposed, so that the solar panels themselves affect approximately 1 hectare of the site. That's defined by this area in here. The panels have a 50 metres setback from the south and approximately 50 from the western boundaries. The panels themselves are going to be south facing, 2.23 metres high. This pink feature you can see here, that's going to be a steel container. That's going to be 2 metres high. The submission didn't confirm any precise colouring, so there is a condition in the agenda to require that container to be coloured green. The solar arrays, that's going to be surrounded by a 2 metre high mesh fence. Again, that's going to be coloured green. There's gravel tracks providing maintenance access. The solar panels themselves, they're going to produce approximately 35% of energy required by the barracks. That 35% is based upon historic use of the barracks. The council are aware that the barracks are looking to move regiments back on to Wheaton Barracks, so the level of activity will increase. The amount of electricity obviously will also increase, but at this present time, so the 35% is based upon a historic use when the barracks certainly weren't as occupied as they are likely to be in the future. After the expiry of the 35-year period, all infrastructure is going to be removed and the land will be reinstated to a scheme to be agreed at a later date. The scheme also includes landscape proposals. So presently there are landscape boundaries to the south and to the west. They comprise of mature trees and native hedgerow. They will be retained. Any gaps within those boundaries will be plugged, and some of the hard landscaped areas that are presently on the site, so for example in this area to the south, they are going to be replaced with grass planted areas. So main issues, principle of development. The National Planning Policy Framework, that has a strong support for renewable energy. Paragraphs 157 and 163 particularly, as we can see in front of us. The Local Plan Policy CL3, again, that is highly supportive of renewable energies, advising that development potential is significant within Fylde, should be maximised whilst ensuring that adverse impacts are addressed. That policy is subject to 10 criteria, which includes impact on landscape, townscape and visual amenity, as well as ecology, agricultural land, heritage, the benefits of the development, aviation, safety, highways, risk and drainage. Bear in mind the sites within the countryside, policy GD4 is of relevance. That is another criteria-based policy. It seeks to restrict development within those areas, but importantly, in this circumstance, it does allow support for uses appropriate to a rural area, and in this circumstance, where it's needed for the purpose of meeting a local business need. Policy GD5, that relates specifically to the land allocation itself, and that allows for the partial or complete redevelopment of that allocation, subject again to criteria, which includes countryside character and highway safety. So, from an office perspective, the proposal provides for renewable energy. It will reduce the energy demands at the barracks, and that affords general support for the development in accordance with those above policies and the National Planning Policy Framework. The criterion that are just been mentioned, they are dealt with in detail within the committee report, but this presentation I've focused on the ones that I think are of main significance. So landscape and visual impact. Again, we've got GD4, GD5, CO3 and ENV1, which all require assessment of landscape and visual impact, with National Planning Policy guidance, which seeks to protect and enhance valued landscapes, but that is commensurate to their statutory status. We've got paragraph 182, which gives great weight to conserving and enhancing landscape and scenic beauty in national parks, the Broads, areas of outstanding natural beauty. Contrary to that, though, we've got planning practice guidance for renewable development, which states that the visual impacts of a well-planned and well-screened solar farm can be properly addressed within the landscape if planned sensitively. So from a landscape character perspective, the site and the surrounding area is one of the lowest landscape designations. It's not within National Park, it's not within the Norfolk Broads, AONB or within the Greenbelt. The existing character is formed by undulating farmland and pockets of development in the locality, such as those to the southeast and to the northwest. The built form of development is positioned to a less prominent location of the site. It's set back 50 metres from the boundary of the barracks and set back behind that retained landscaping, and there's also going to be new planting to plug the gaps. The proposal will alter the open appearance and unbuilt appearance of the site, undoubtedly, but impact itself, bearing in mind that setback is really restricted to the site itself and wouldn't have a significant impact on the surrounding character of the area. Visual impact. Receptors themselves are limited and restricted to the public footpath to the west and the two pockets of development really to the southeast and to the northwest. There are going to be some indirect views from these houses, but as you can appreciate, the main aspect is in a northerly direction over the remainder of the barracks site or to the south over agricultural land. The landscape strategy again itself will help to reduce the visibility of the solar farm from those receptors, especially once mature. Other important consideration obviously is residential amenity. We've got policy CL3 which supports renewable energy subject to an assessment of amenity. Again have GD7 which is a general policy that we refer to concerning this issue, and that seeks to safeguard development so that it's sympathetic to existing residents. The neighbours that we've discussed, they're a minimum of 300 and a maximum of approximately 400 metres from the development itself. So that has good separation, which ensures there's no physical impact from the arrays themselves in terms of loss of light, overshadowing or dominance. On that basis, there are limited impacts and they're related to noise and reflected light from the panels themselves. So in terms of noise, you do have some solar panels which actually move and track the path of the sun. In this circumstance, so the panels are fixed, so obviously there's going to be no noise associated to the final operation of the development itself, and any noise will be largely limited to the construction period only. Reflected light. Properties to the northwest, obviously we'll be looking into the back of the solar panels, so won't be affected at all by reflected light. Those positioned to the southeast, again, they don't have a direct line of sight to the arrays, and in some respects will also be obstructed by the buildings just positioned to the west. So on that basis, it's not considered that the development itself would have any significant impact at all on the amenity of neighbours. Another important consideration is highways. Again, post-operation, there's going to be very little traffic associated at all to the development. It's going to be more to do with the maintenance and upkeep of those solar panels. Any impact there is restricted to the construction process. And in that regard, the applicants provided a construction environmental management plan which details certain aspects of how it's going to be constructed. That confirms that it's going to be over an 8-month period. Vehicles are going to be accessing the site via main roads. Those construction arrangements are going to be largely between Monday to Friday, between 8 AM and 5 PM. And deliveries will also be coordinated to try and minimise impacts on local roads. Higher Authority hasn't raised any objection. So on that basis, application is recommended for approval, and that is subject to adoption of the Habitat Regulation Assessment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. So at this stage, we throw it open for questions from members. So,
Councillor Nixon has indicated.
Councillor Nixon, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to support this application. I know Wheaton Barracks very well, been on there quite often as a councillor. Anything that assists getting it brought up into the 20th century is going to be something, because it is quite archaic on there, and it does need some assistance. So those guys that are well, soldiers, men and ladies that get on there need all mod cons, shall we say. So yeah, I'm happy to support the application and move approval.
You're happy to take that? Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose just in terms of your first point concerning flooding, obviously flooding in terms of the development rates of the application site itself, as opposed to what would potentially happen in the wider area. It's been demonstrated that the site itself isn't subject to flooding. There are existing hard standards on there. They obviously encourage overland flows of rain that could fall on those hard surfaces, but there are soft areas around there which would act as natural drainage and percolation into the groundwater. So development itself won't be subject to flooding. Sorry, I've forgotten your last comment. Sorry, yes, maximum number of. Obviously, we are just considering the applications in front of us. You'll see from the layout that the actual land take that the arrays take up is small in comparison to the application site itself. There is space indeed upon retain hard standing about that to expand, but also there is much larger land availability on the rest of the barrack site. So yes, there is opportunity there. Whether or not the barracks choose to take that up, I do not know at the moment. They are committed certainly to delivering this 35%. We are in discussion with them about other alterations to the camp that could involve provision of further solar development as well. So.
Councillor Evans, thank you.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you very much. Thanks, Rob, for the presentation. I'm happy in general to support this application. I'd just like some clarification there. From BAE Systems, a condition is requested that demonstrates compliance by identifying and introducing engineering solutions to prevent perching and roosting, as well as nesting of birds. Could you give me a bit of information on that? I'm also thinking at the back of my mind, obviously down the line, we've got a couple of solar farms that potentially are going to be coming before us near BE systems. So I'm just interested in what conversations have been had there, Rob, please.
Yeah, yeah, quite rightly, well picked up. The British Aerospace, they have raised concerns about birds nesting within the arrays themselves. That issue is to do with bird strike with planes. I think British Aerospace might have been a little bit OTT with regards to this application. The applicant certainly did push back, and I think I have imposed the condition, but that is based more upon the fact that the applicant pushed back on the condition based upon the fact that there's already bird nesting opportunities on the site. So if I bring this up, in the area where the arrays are going to be cleared, there are obviously self-seeded trees, so they provide nesting habitat. The difficulty I had though is what the existing nesting opportunity is compared to what the proposed nesting opportunity would be. The applicant didn't provide me any evidence based to say either or, so went with the condition. But yeah, nesting opportunities are largely to do with underneath the solar panels. But in terms of the other solar schemes that we've dealt with and could be considering in the future, a lot of them will be retaining the grazing land underneath. So that provides an additional nesting habitat. And in most circumstances, the conditions that are requested by British Aerospace are certainly reasonable. And in terms of the arrays themselves, can be easily overcome. I mean, building designs themselves, they incorporate bird wires, don't they, to stop pigeons nesting. They can have netting, those kind of things underneath the arrays to prevent roosting. So it doesn't present an issue, and indeed the applicant, whilst they pushed back, didn't raise any objection to the condition itself. So that suggests to me that it can be discharged quite reasonably.
Thanks so much for that clarification. Thank you.
I've just got one or two areas for clarification. Technically, this is a temporary installation, which, according to the report, 25 to 35 years, that's operational activity. Could the applicant, that presumably would mean that at the end of 25, 35 years, the solar panels are at the end of their use. But if the applicant, the applicant would be able to renew an application and replace the solar panels with further panels, and that would be a separate planning application if appropriate. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So the submission confirmed a ranged time frame for the operational life. So it's between 25 to 35 years. The majority of solar farms that we've dealt with, we've issued a temporary consent based upon anything between 35 and 40-year periods. So the development we determined from an office perspective would be acceptable on the longer shelf life of a 35-year period. Obviously, prior to that expiry, there's conditions in place which require the applicant to submit and agree details with ourselves about how that land's going to be reinstated. The other option, obviously, that is available to the applicant is to reapply for the development.
And finally, on page 8, there's a paragraph there where it says that the planning statement confirms that the scheme is part of the Army Sustainability, Efficiency and Exploitation, that's a mouthful, a C initiative, which seeks to make a significant positive environmental impact and contribute to defined targets by the government, etc. And the aim of the scheme is for 35%. In terms of deliberating on this particular application, is that a significant factor that should be weighted in there?
I think the mere fact the barracks are wanting to provide renewable energy on the site is significant support for the scheme. I think my introductory slide on the main issues in terms of MPPF and our local plan itself, there's strong support for all forms of renewable energy, and indeed that the draft National Planning Policy Framework that's been consulted upon at the moment provides even stronger support for renewable energy. So yes, it's 35%. That's 35% of a small amount at the moment. With people coming in, it could be 35% of a larger amount moving forward. But I think that percentage figure is in certain respects immaterial. That the mere fact that they're looking to become self-sustaining through renewable energy, reduce reliance on the national grid for the generation of electricity is an important consideration.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Are there any questions or any points? We've had a proposer and a seconder, but have we got any more questions or anybody? Councillor Collins.
It's just a point about procedure, Chair. We're supposed to enter this chamber with an open mind. We might all have formed a preliminary view on an application, but we should be prepared to change that view when we're here. The first two speakers, well, while we were dealing with questions, proposed and seconded the application without anybody else in the chamber being given the opportunity to ask questions or express a contrary view. Some of the best decisions I've made on the planning committee is when I've come in with one view, and during the course of debate, that view has changed 180 degrees, and the whole committee's homed in on a decision that was contrary to what I first had when I entered the chamber. Now, it's happening quite a lot that the first and second speakers proposing something be accepted. There should be debate. We should finish with the questions. There should be debate. If there's no speakers to the contrary, in the past, the chair's always said, does anybody want to speak against this or for this application? And if there isn't, then perhaps that's the time for someone to propose acceptance or refusal, but not the first and second speakers. I mean, there's nothing contentious about this application, and I'm not going to speak against it, but this is what we should be doing in general.
Right, pick up that point. It's also for individual members to decide whether they've got questions and at what point they want to discuss things. So it's been opened up to people this morning, and therefore it's available for discussion. If nobody is forthcoming, then we have to come to a decision.
Chairman, just as a point
Yeah.
on that, the first person said that they were minded to support it, and the second person said they'd be minded to second it. That's absolutely fine. They didn't actually propose it and second it.
Well, the recording, we'll check on the recording, but people should have an open mind when they enter the chamber, and they should be prepared to change their provisional view that they have, having read the notes. In the past, we've had questions and answers before we started debate, and after a reasonable amount of debate, it should be open for someone to propose acceptance or refusal.
So you'll have picked up very clearly that I said at the beginning, let's have questions. And if people are forthcoming with questions, you deal with the questions. If people aren't forthcoming with the questions, then you move on to the debate.
But Chair, somebody might have a question that nobody else has thought of that might be particularly important.
And we're still
And
waiting
until
for
we've had the
questions.
answers to those questions, until everybody's had the information, then we have the debate, and then we should have a proposal from the seconder. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any comments, any further questions, or any debating points that you want to make? I think I'm giving the committee plenty of opportunity to do this. Let's make that very, very clear. Councillor Nixon.
I did come into the council with a complete open mind. I hadn't predetermined any of this. I've gone through it all last night. I've looked at it again this morning, and to me, whatever questions or yes, somebody could have thought something and agree. Somebody could have thought something that I hadn't thought of, but I don't think it would have been that significant that it would have changed my mind.
Thank you. Councillor Evans, do you want to come in?
Yeah. My only thoughts on this, Chair, is in my experience, when somebody has, when one of us has supported early on in the discussion, you are always at pains to say that you note it, but will now continue with the debate. So I'm not sure that somebody sort of pinning their colours to the mast early in the debate has that sway on the rest of us. We're all individuals with our own mind. And while I understand, I think Councillor Collins is concerned about closing down debate, the opposite end of that scale is that you as the chairman are making sure that that debate is still open and has, and quite often, an inordinate amount of time to rehearse and discuss from every possible angle. And everybody has the opportunity to speak and put their views forward. So I don't really think there's an issue there, but, you know, each to their own.
Yeah, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. I think in terms of predetermination, I think once the debate commences, whether it's questions or the debate, all the information is before the committee. So the committee have seen the report, they've seen the officer recommendation. If there are speakers, they've heard from the speakers. So all the information is there. So in terms of that is when the determination period effectively starts. So I wouldn't say that that was at that point a predetermined position, because all the information has been put before the committee. During the debate, it might well be that additional information comes forward, but of course, until we get to the vote, that is still open for anyone to change their position. So even somebody who's moved can ask for their to withdraw their motion as they go forward. So I think in terms of the way that the debate is taken, even if there is an early motion, then that is completely proper. There are many examples where, for example, the chairman may move the recommendation from the chair before any debate has taken place. I'm not saying necessarily this council, this committee, but that is the practice I've witnessed at other councils. So I don't think personally that there is an issue with that approach that this committee takes. Thank you, Chairman.
Chair.
Of course.
If people have questions and those questions haven't been answered, then not all the information is before the committee. Thank you.
Well, it's for others to judge, I suppose, whether those questions have been answered or not. It's not for one individual to decide that. It's to listen to the answers and people make up their own minds. That's the whole point of the committee. Right, I think we'll move on now. Are there any further comments? Questions? No. Are we happy to move to the vote? Okay, thank you. We've had somebody that was minded to propose. Are you going to propose? And somebody that was minded to second. Are you happy to second? All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. Unanimous. Thank you. We move on. Pardon?
We just need to change the officer.
Yes, we need to change the officers, yeah, who have contributed to this. Thank you, Rob, for that presentation. Item 2 will be page 38 on your agenda paper. Matthew Taylor will be the officer responsible for presenting on this particular item. There are no speakers.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to members of the committee. So item 2 on the agenda is an application at the Pathways site off Blackpool Road in Newton. A series of applications have come to the committee previously on this site, so some members may be familiar with it. I'll do a brief refresh of the background as I run through the presentation. So the application is to vary the condition on an extant planning permission which lists the approved plans in order to increase the roof pitch and ridge height of 4 dwellings which have been approved on the area of the site within the red line here. So this is the situation that pre-existed the current development. So the site as a whole had a certificate of lawful use for various commercial, retail and garden centre uses, and a stable building that's here on the back of the site. That was kind of the garden centre building and some external storage area here. There are a series of commercial uses within this building. There's then a existing bungalow at the Pathway site with a detached garage here to the northern part that's retained around the development, and a second bungalow here at Longacres. This area was used as an overspill car park, and there's a floodlit menage at the back of the site. This is the situation as it was May 2023. This is the latest aerial photograph. See, all the existing buildings have been cleared. The Pathways bungalow has been retained around that development, as has the Longacres bungalow here to the east. There's now a collection of stable buildings not shown in this aerial photograph, but have been erected on this land to the rear of the site, and that exercise arena has been retained in connection with those. So effectively, the extant planning permission was for the demolition of those existing buildings and the construction of 4 bungalows on the site. So this is the approved layout for the 2023 application, which this scheme is seeking to vary. So ground level rises in this direction going up to Blackpool Road. So Pathways is at a higher level, as is Longacres. So this is in an area, a bit of a dip in comparison to these two, and as you come down this access road off the main road. In essence, the scheme was granted on the basis that there was a trade-off between a pre-existing scenario where the garden centre and commercial buildings had, the development had no greater impact than that existing scenario on the area of separation, and there were other enhancements. For example, this overspill car park is returned to green space. There's other landscaping enhancements around the edges of the site. The overall footprint of the buildings was smaller, and there's wider gaps and soft landscape areas between them. So effectively, it was a trade-off to say that the proposed scenario was no more harmful on the area of separation than the pre-existing scenario. Just in terms of context, so this is the view before the development commenced from Blackpool Road at the access. So you've got the existing bungalow at Longacres, quite a steep pitched roof, up to 7.1 metres in height to the ridge, and then the Pathways bungalow screening in the foreground, the development behind, which is effectively in this area and then extends further back. That's 6.1 metres in height to the ridge. This is the situation as it is at the moment. So the development has commenced in accordance with the previous permission. That's the site of plot 1 yet to be constructed. This is plot 2 that's under construction. You can see the Pathways garage and the Longacres bungalow with this large dormer on the rear. So this is heading into the front of the site where that access road, the cul-de-sac, would run. Again, plot 2. This steel here is a facing gable on the rear of the dwelling. So just to give you an idea of what the final ridge height would be as proposed under this application, that would be 1.2 metres taller than this point, just to give members kind of a point of reference as to how that would appear. You can see the stable buildings at the back of the site that have been constructed in the meantime. Similarly, again, this is plot 4. So there's 2 dwellings under construction at the moment. Again, the height of this steel In that case, it's 1.1 metres taller to the ridge than the height of that. You can see the Pathways and Longacres bungalow in the background. This is the view heading into the site down that access road with the detached garage in the foreground and then plot 2 in the background. So the application involves 2 changes to each of the house types that were previously approved. They involve a 4-degree steepening of each dwelling's roof pitch from 18.5 to 22.5 degrees and a consequential 0.6 metre increase in each dwelling's main ridge height from 4.8 metres to 5.4 metres. The reason for this is due to the roofing material. So as part of discharging the conditions, we approved an artificial slate, which is this product here. And that artificial slate, extract from the brochure here, requires a minimum roof pitch of 22.5 degrees to hang the slate. Previously, the approved pitch was 18.5 degrees and the applicant had proposed a standard concrete tile. We wanted a superior roofing material that was more kind of rural in its appearance, and this is where this artificial slate has come in, but as a consequence of that, the roof pitch needs to be increased, and that also generates an increase in ridge height. So there isn't any other change to the scheme. The layout's the same, the spacing with surrounding properties, landscaping, appearance is all as previously approved. It is simply the alterations to the roof that are part of this application. Now this slide basically shows what was approved in blue here and then what is now proposed overlaid in red. So this is the front elevation. You can see the difference in roof height between the approved ridge and the proposed ridge. Similarly on the rear and then also on the side. So the eaves height is maintained and then the roof pitch gradually steepens to get this 22.5 degree pitch that's required up to this revised ridge height, which is 0.6 metres taller than what was previously approved. So there's 2 house types. This is the second house type, although it broadly shows the same thing. Again, the increase in ridge height at the front and rear and the steepening of that roof pitch up to the heightened ridge on the side, just to give members a visual kind of perspective as to what the implications would be of the scheme. So in terms of the main issues, that increased roof level massing results in a combined 8% increase in overall building volume on the previously approved scheme. The changes to the roof pitch and the raising of the ridge result in a very limited increase in the development's visual impact that doesn't fundamentally alter the material considerations that were arrived at previously, which led to the application being approved within the area of separation. In essence, the question to be asked here is whether or not, if this was the scheme that was before the committee at the time of the original application, would the decision have been any different? It's our view that it wouldn't have been, and that these changes to the roof are so limited in their extent that they don't have any greater impact on the area of separation or the purpose of including land within that. As I mentioned, there's no other changes to the remaining aspects of the development, so it's limited to the roof pitch and height alterations. The benefit of doing this is that there's a superior roofing material, so we get this artificial slate instead of a more suburban concrete tile. The dwellings would still appear as true bungalows. There's not enough head height and there's no internal staircase to get rooms within the roof. In this case, there's no dormers. They would still be significantly lower than the existing properties at Pathways and Longacres that screen it in the foreground. So I've provided the figures here. So it's even with the increased ridge height, it's still 0.7 metres lower than the Pathways bungalow and 1.7 metres lower than the Longacres bungalow that I showed in the earlier pictures. Those properties are also elevated in relation to the site, so they do have the effect of screening it quite extensively from Blackpool Road. In terms of amenity impacts, all the spacing distances, window positions, boundary treatments, and screening with the existing dwellings at Pathways and Longacres are unaltered by this scheme. As I mentioned, similarly to the assessment of visual impact, the very modest changes in the roof height and pitch would not have any additional adverse effects through loss of outlook, overlooking or overshadowing to those surrounding occupiers. All the conditions have been updated to refer to the revised plans and the details previously approved by a condition discharge application. Just a note for members that biodiversity net gain isn't applicable to Section 73 applications to vary conditions on existing permissions where the original permission was granted prior to biodiversity net gain coming into force, so that doesn't factor in to this decision. So taking account of all this, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Matthew, for that presentation. Do we have a question? Councillor Settle. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. To me, the difference is hardly noticeable. I'm very happy with the proposal. Slightly bemused by the fact that these new tiles need a higher ridge height. Don't understand why, but I'm not a technical person, so I'm very happy with it.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Can we see the slide again with the steel work? Is that steel work already in place?
Yes, so
Yeah.
for facing gable at the back of the property, so effectively this.
All right, so that steel work won't be affected by the increase in ridge height.
No. So
Right, yeah.
parts of the buildings already have a sufficient roof pitch, so the increase is limited to the main portion of the roof here. But the facing gables on the front and the rear.
Right, yeah.
Councillor Evans, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. On the basis that these are changes that planning officers have asked for, there's a certain amount of a trade-off where the better product, better visual finish to the properties, and the trade-off for that is a slight increase in height. I don't think there's a massive material change in what was obviously originally discussed at the original application meeting, and it's encouraging to see that we're getting some more bungalows built in file, which is always good. The fact that there's a slight dip in the tomography means that, you know, the increase in ridge height is lessened a little bit by that, because the existing houses, to my understanding, are sitting slightly higher and are closer to the road line. So, you know, I think we're just tidying up here. Realistically, I've not got a problem. I can't see any objections to this property, this alteration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. Reading the neighbours' comments, I agree with the raising the height of the bungalow is unnecessary, but it does query the current height of the bungalows have already impacted upon their views from Longacre. So I'm not so sure about this, really.
I'll bring the officer in.
Yeah.
Comment on particularly the last point that you made.
So there's a couple of points about the kind of relationship with Longacre. I think that the first thing is that this property is elevated in relation to the site. They've got this balcony at the back of this dormer bungalow here, so that the views, that bearing in mind that loss of a view isn't a material planning consideration, it's impact on amenity through kind of impact on outlook. For example, if you were going to create a really oppressive or overbearing development in somebody's outlook, then that's subtly different to a loss of a view. So views across the site towards the countryside beyond aren't specifically material planning considerations. But what you do have is this elevated aspect to this property. The spacing distances that I've mentioned, so the orientation, first of all, is slightly offset to this bungalow, albeit that the rear faces directly towards it. This is deliberately orientated with its side elevation facing the rear of that bungalow, so that you've got a rear to side facing aspect without habitable room windows that could look directly into this property. Obviously, bearing in mind that this is, I think, 7.1 metres, and the finished ridge height of this would be 5.4 metres, plus the difference in levels and the spacing distances between them. That the minimum spacing distance I've mentioned is 16 metres, which is towards the back of this outrigger, rather than the actual main wall of the dwelling, which would be several metres further away, where that dormer bungalow, where that dormer is located. So it readily complies with our spacing standards between rear and side elevations, so that there shouldn't be any, or there's no change to the position of that dwelling on the site. So really it's the impact arising from that limited change to the roof pitch. Obviously most of that is contained at the ridge line, which again is further away from the properties. So you're only looking at this area, the impact of this area, in addition to what was previously approved, which is really quite imperceptible, I would suggest, from the rear of that property on Longacres.
Are there any more questions or contributions, or are there any points that anybody wants to debate? Is the committee happy to move to a decision on this particular application? We need a proposer and a seconder. Well, I've got a number of Councillor Settle, you're proposing it.
Councillor Farrington.
Councillor Farrington, secondly. So it's proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. That's not unanimous, but and all those against, and any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you.